Okay, welcome. We are live. We'll give a moment for everyone to get on. Hope everyone can make it on. Welcome to our class today, the JLI class, telling the truth. Can you lie? When can you tell the truth? When can you lie? Let's give 60 seconds for everyone to get on. Welcome. I'm broadcasting here live from the Bay Area in California, the San Francisco Bay Area and the East Bay and the Tri-Valley. Welcome, and we'll give about 60 seconds for everybody to join us here together. Welcome, everybody. Welcome. Okay, our class for today. Welcome one, welcome all. So we as Jews, we spend quite a bit of time talking about what we put in our mouth, the laws of kosher. We just finished Pesach. Today we're going to be talking about what comes out of our mouth, specifically talking about telling the truth, deviating slightly from the truth, altering the truth, changing the truth, lying, etc., etc. And first and foremost, I want to make a disclaimer that we are going to be presenting a general perspective, an outline, a framework, the Torah's Weltanschauung, but in no way, shape, or form should this class be taken as a last word and the final law on the matter. Everybody in each situation should please ask their competent local Orthodox practicing rabbi to know in each particular situation, because there are various conditions which can vary from case to case. So let's begin with 5 cases. We'll begin with 5 questions, and we'll open as follows. Number 1. We have someone here in our community. His name is Tzvika. He's an Israeli. His name is Tzvika. And he once told me, he says, Rabbi, I go to Starbucks, which some of us have not had the pleasure of doing for some time. I don't know, wherever you are, they might be opened. But he goes to Starbucks, and they ask him what his name is. He makes his order. And instead of saying his name, how do you spell it, Tzvika, it's difficult for Americans to say the tzuz. So he just says Bob, B-O-B. He says, I tell him my name is Bob. It solves all the problems. First case, an innocuous lie, I guess you could say. Is that permitted? Is that allowed? Is that a violation of one of the mitzvahs in the Torah? As a Jew, is one allowed to do that? Question number 1. Question number 2, someone is just coming back from their appointment with their OBGYN, and they are told, they have confirmed that they are expecting a child. Okay? They meet their friend, and for whatever reason, this friend is not very socially acute, didn't take his cues in social niceties, and says, hey, you're looking like you're expecting. Maybe the person looks a little bit heavy. You haven't even told your husband yet. It's a little bit embarrassing. It's early on. You feel uncomfortable. Are you allowed to say no? I'm not expecting. Question number 2. Question number 3, you're a rabbi and you're asked to give a eulogy for somebody. Are you allowed to embellish? Are you allowed to perhaps add to qualities that were sort of ordinary? Can you make them extraordinary? Perhaps someone gave charity on a regular basis. Can you say he was a charitable person? He was a giving person? Can you add? Can you embellish? Can you exaggerate? Would that be considered a deviation from the truth, or should one just stick to the script? Question number 4. You've just been in the office. You spent your day in the office. For whatever reason, you think that your wife is not going to have much food when you get home. There's a snack bar. You go to the snack machine, and before you come home, you have quite a bit to eat. You come home, and as it should so happen, your wife has prepared for you this incredible dinner, and she tells you, honey, I really hope that you're hungry, because we're going to have a special dinner tonight. Are you hungry? You've just had 4 chocolate bars, 3 bags of chips, and 2 Snapples. Are you allowed to say, yes, I'm hungry, looking forward, thank you so much for this delicious dinner? Okay. And the last question, you are running an advertising firm, and your job is to make things look good. You're supposed to make them get rid of any perceived imperfections. You're supposed to cover up everything and show the product in its grandest light possible. Is one allowed to cover up the faults of a product? In the advertising firm, you're selling a house. Hey, why don't you patch that up over there? It looked like there might have been a little crack in the ceiling. We live in California here. Sometimes the earth shifts. Why give off the impression that there's some foundational issues here? Is one allowed to do that? So these are our 5 case studies, as we'll call them, as we open today's class. Number 1, the case of the Starbucks. The guy's name is Tzvika. You want to say his name is Bob. It's just easier to get the order done. Takes less time. He has on a rush. Got to go. Number 2, the woman who just came back out of the doctor's office, finding out that she's expecting, and now she's confronted by someone who asks her. She's somewhat embarrassed. She wants to be more modest. She wants to hide it. Is she allowed to lie about that? Number 3, you're the rabbi. You're asked to give a eulogy. Can you embellish, exaggerate, and add? Number 4, you had that snack at the office, and now you come home, and your wife has this incredible dinner lined up. She asks you if you're hungry. Can you say yes? And number 5, can you exaggerate or cover up the faults as you are advertising and as you're trying to sell something? Okay, these are 5 questions. Let's see if we got any answers to them. Let's see how we would proceed, how we would approach this from a Jewish perspective, which way we would go, what are the sources. I'll actually post in the chat at the end, if you'd like to look up the sources yourself. We'll be quoting quite a few pieces of the Talmud, quite a few parts of Maimonides, of the Rambam, some sentences from the Torah, and let's put it all together and form a grand picture on how we, the Jewish people, through the lens of the Torah, perceive truth-telling, deviation from the truth, and lying. Okay? Now, in the world in general, there are various schools of thought. Among the philosophers, there are the absolutists. The absolutists, the philosophers, Thomas Aquinas, Aristotle, Augustine, Immanuel Kant, they felt that lying and deviating from the truth must be avoided at all costs. Because if we can't trust what comes out of our fellow man's mouth, then that brings to the breakdown of society. And even if in one particular situation it would benefit you for lying, maybe in a noble sense, maybe not from a nefarious perspective, not because you have ill intention, maybe it's noble, but even if you'll benefit, but society as a whole will lose because we do not have a society that tells the truth. And therefore, these philosophers felt that at all costs, one should always tell the truth. There's a moral imperative to tell the truth. That's on one that's on one side of the equation. Then you have, on the other side, you have Nietzsche and others who say that lying is a necessity of life. That's just how you get through life. How are you doing? I'm doing well. You know, people say if you counted how many times you don't exactly tell the truth a day, it would be many. Hey, how are you doing? How do you look? You look great today. Nice to see you. All these things that are not necessarily the absolute truth, and it's just a necessity of life. As William Blake, the poet, once said, a truth that's told with bad intent beats all the lies that you can invent. It's a good rhyme. So that's on the other side of the equation. And Judaism, as always, in Judaism we have the middle ground. The Jewish people, we take the middle road. Obviously, there are situations where everyone would understand that lying is not only allowed, it's required. If the Gestapo come to your door and say, are there any Jews here? Obviously, the answer is no. To save a life, to save someone from sickness, there's no question. It's very obvious. No problem. Okay, that's on sort of one side of the equation. On the other side, we try to be truthful. Where do we stand? Where does Torah stand? What are the sources? Let's begin our journey together. And welcome. I see we have British Columbia and Jakarta, Indonesia, and Texas, whether it's morning, whether it's evening, whether it's night. Thank you for joining us. Those of you who are joining us in our community here in California, welcome. And here we begin. We'll begin with a sentence in the second book of the Torah, the book of Exodus and the book of Shmos. And there it says, Lo tateh mishpot evyoncha berivo, which means don't pervert the judgment of a poor man. Midvar sheker tirchak, you should distance yourself from a false matter. Ve'naki ve'tzadik al taharog, and don't allow an innocent person to be killed. The Torah is here describing and talking, giving us the picture of a court of law. The Torah continues by saying, V'shochad lo tikach, don't take bribery. We're talking to a judge. We're talking in a court setting, and the Torah says, not only are we not allowed to lie, the Torah says, midvar sheker tirchak. Tirchak means we have to distance ourselves from a false matter. Okay? And from here, there's one other sentence, and again, I'll put the sources if you'd like. If you'd like to study this on your own, you're more than welcome. We're just going to give a taste here for 20, 30 minutes together. It's another sentence. The Torah, we read it a few weeks ago in the book of Leviticus, Vayikra, the Torah portion of Kedoshim. The Torah says, Lo tignavu, velo techachashu, velo teshakru ish b'amito. You should not steal, don't deal falsely, don't lie. One man to his fellow, one has to deal honestly, one has to be an honest, upright, truthful person. Again, he used the word sheker, falsehood. Okay. So, these are the two sentences in the entire Torah that talk to us about distancing ourselves and not telling lies. Now, what do they actually mean? As we know, as Jews, we have the written Torah, but we cannot possibly try to understand the written Torah without the background that comes with us. And in the Talmud, it's in the Tractate of Shavuot, on page 30, Daf Lamed, and Maimonides brings us as well. The Torah the Talmud tells us that both these sentences are limited to and specifically referring to a courtroom. They're referring to financial transactions. So, for instance, for example, in a Jewish courtroom, one has to be careful to the nth degree about any even possibility of perception of falsehood. For instance, the Talmud says, how do you know that you have a judge and he knows that one of the other judges on the panel is not such an upright person? Perhaps he's a thief. Now, it happens to be that you think that he's right in this particular case, but if you're sitting on a panel with someone who is not of the highest moral caliber, you have to separate yourself. Midvar sheker tirchak, distance yourself from something which is not true. Sorry, apologize. That's how you know this is live. Distance yourself from something which is not true, from something which is improper. When people come to the court, you have the defendant, you have the prosecution. Let's say one side is wealthier than the other, says the Talmud. This sentence teaches us you have to dress them equally. They have to appear equal before the court. They have to both be dressed in the same clothing. And we tell the wealthy man, if he's in the prosecution or the defendant, either you dress like the poor man or you pay for him to dress like you. In other words, we need to have equality. We need to have fairness. We cannot have even the perception or anything that would slightly bring us to not a completely true conclusion. This is true also in transactions, anything that involves any business. And this, unfortunately, many parents are guilty of this, or many people are guilty of this. You can go to an amusement park, you go to the zoo, and they say 6 and under is this price, over 6 is this price, and your daughter just turned 7, just yesterday, and maybe it was on the Jewish calendar, maybe it was on the secular calendar, and to save a few bucks, you say, they're still 6. Here, this is cheating. This is stealing. This is, to the nth degree, the Jewish code of law enjoins us to distance ourselves from even the slightest appearance of perception of falsehood. So when it comes to, let's just finish part 1 of our class, so to speak. If it comes to an area where there is some financial repercussion, some financial expression of this interaction, if it has something to do with a courtroom, in these two settings, the Torah is very, very, very clear. In these two Torah settings, the Torah is clear. Even if when it comes to trickery, when it comes to fooling somebody, when it comes to deceitfulness. So for instance, Maimonides tells us you can't act in a smooth tongue and luring nature. In the laws of conduct in chapter 2, he tells us, don't try inviting someone to your house if you know they can't come. You're just trying to, so to speak, butter them up. You're just trying to create a situation where they owe you one. There too, this is deceitfulness. This is cheating. This is not just merely an innocuous lie. Here there is some tangible repercussion of the actual lie. But what happens if I just am telling a lie for a lie's sake? Does the Torah actually tell me, if you tell me it's day outside, you ask me, is it day or night, is it raining or not? I say, no, it's not raining, and it is. Which mitzvah did I violate? Which precept did I violate? Where in the Torah do we find that a Jewish person must keep the emet, must keep the truth? Where? Is it one of the 613 mitzvahs? Is there a mitzvah in the Torah that tells me a Jewish person must tell the truth? What is the biblical source? Where does that come from? Again, not in the courtroom and not in financial matters, not where there's a financial repercussion, not where there's some business transaction. Here, that's obvious. The Torah goes out of its way, and in many places in the Torah it tells us to be honest in our business dealings, cheating on taxes, cheating one's fellow. This is not what we're referring to. There, the Torah is very, very clear. Let's talk about just interpersonal, innocuous lies that really don't have a financial or legal repercussion. Dear friends, the Torah tells us in the 5th book of the Torah tells us in the book of Devarim, the Torah tells us that we are enjoined and commanded. It's one of the mitzvahs in the Torah, Maimonides says, to emulate God. Vehalachta bid rachav. We are to walk in the path that God has laid forth before us. Mahu chananata afatachanu. God is merciful. We too should be merciful. Mahu racham afataracham. God is compassionate. We too should be compassionate. In other words, we emulate God. God visits the sick. It's a mitzvah to emulate God. God comforts those who are mourning. It's a mitzvah. Well, guess what, dear friends? One of the hallmark traits of God is emet, is truth. Indeed, that's called chotamo shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the seal of God is truth. And therefore, in Judaism, telling the truth is not so much of a commandment as it is a value, a moral characteristic that God wants each and every human being to have ingrained within themselves. I'll give you an example. Rabbi Krinsky, the Rebbe's secretary, tells the story, and this is where there is financial repercussions. He was once, the Rebbe asked him, called him into his office, and asked him if he could please buy some supplies for the office. So Rabbi Krinsky went, bought the supplies for the office, and brought the Rebbe back the receipt to show him that he had paid and how it happened. The Rebbe looked at the receipt, and the Rebbe said, I don't see taxes were paid here. So Rabbi Krinsky responded that Chabad, being a nonprofit organization, we don't need to pay sales tax, and hence I showed them they know of our tax-exempt status, and therefore they didn't charge us tax. The Rebbe says, yes, but those items that you bought were personally for me. They weren't for the organization. So please go back. Please tell them and make sure you pay the taxes. We're talking about a matter of pennies here. A matter of pennies. But nonetheless, when it comes to a matter of financial concern, here, to the nth degree. But what about when it's not a financial matter? Here it is a value. It is something, a moral imperative, as opposed to a biblical precept and commandment. Now, what is the difference? Fine, it's something we should do. Well, there's a difference. Because there are many values that we cherish and hold dear. Honesty is one of them, but there are others. The question is, what happens when you have a conflict of values? We are enjoined to be merciful and compassionate and truthful and honest and modest. What happens if some of those values come in conflict with each other? What's the pecking order? What's the hierarchy? How do we discern and differentiate and know which should take precedence over the other? So, those of you who are joining us now, welcome, welcome. We're going to now talk about a very fascinating piece of the Talmud. Maybe you've studied it before. It's a familiar one. It's from the Tractate of Ketubot. It's on page 16 and 17. And the Talmud asks the question, Ketzad meraktim l'fnei hakala. When you come to a wedding, and you see the bride. Says the Talmud, what is the proper approach? What do? You go over to the groom, and what do you tell him? Let's say the bride happens not to be find favor in your eyes. You don't find her particularly to be a beautiful bride. So Beit Shammai says, we don't deviate from the truth. Kala kamot shehi, which Tosfot tells us means either say nothing or find some admirable trait that you can accentuate, that you can highlight. She has beautiful smile. She has wonderful fingers. You find something that you can highlight, but you don't say something which is not true in this circumstance. comes Bet Hillel, the yeshiva, the Talmudic academy of the sage Hillel. And this is actually in Jewish law and how we Jews have developed our custom. You say, Kala na'eh v'chasuda. She's a beautiful bride. It's in the eyes of the beholder. For him, she's beautiful, so you say. In other words, what we see as follows, without getting into the particulars of these pieces of Talmud, what we see here is that honesty is very important. But making a bride and groom happy on their wedding day is also very important. And therefore, one is allowed to be mishaneh tamet. You don't lie, because in the eyes of the beholder, for him, she's a beautiful bride, so it's not something which is a lie. It just maybe is not exactly 100% the way you feel about it. It's a subjective reality. It's not an objective reality, right? So therefore, in this case, one is allowed to slightly deviate in order to create this beautiful atmosphere for the chatan and kala, for the bride and the groom. Indeed, we actually have this a few times in the Torah. You're familiar with this. Remember, Joseph is sold by his brothers in slavery, and they reunite after more than 2 decades of not seeing each other. And then finally their father passes away, and the brothers are worried. The brothers are worried that now that their father's not there, Joseph is going to take revenge for what they've done. And therefore they literally concoct the story. They come back after the funeral. It's at the end of the book of Bereshit, at the end of the first book of the Torah of Genesis. They come back and they tell Yosef, Daddy, Abba, Tati, before he passed away, he told us that you should please forgive us. Now that didn't occur, but they acted this way to maintain the harmony within the family, to maintain peace amidst this homogeneous and beautiful family. And here too as well. Obviously their father would have wanted him to forgive, but they created and concocted and deviated slightly from the truth, or more than slightly. We actually have God does this himself. God himself lies in the Torah. Familiar? The Torah tells us that God comes to Abraham. And God comes to Abraham, and it says, God told him, I'll read now from the Gemara, it's the Gemara in Yevamot, it's on page 65b, and God comes, tells Sarah, she hears. God doesn't tell Sarah, but Sarah hears that at 9 years old, she's going to have a child. She's 89 years old right now. She's going to have a child. She starts laughing and she says, my husband is an old man. He's 99 years old. Abraham was 10 years older than Sarah. She's an old man. How's he going to have a child? Well, God repeats that conversation to Abraham. God comes to Abraham and says, your wife said that she feels too old to have a child. You notice the lie? God didn't say that your wife said that you are too old to have a child. God said your wife said that she's too old to have a child. And says the Talmud and Tractate Yevamot, from here we learn that peace, the attribute, the value in Judaism of shalom, of peace, can be altered for truth. So we have, again, these competing values. You have the value of peace, wanting to create peace in this family of Yosef and his brothers, wanting to create peace between a husband and a wife, wanting to create peace between a bride and a groom and be able to make the foundation of their marriage beautiful. Here, shalom, peace, supersedes, overrides on the pecking order and the hierarchy of values in Judaism. Shalom supersedes emet. Maybe not to lie, but to be able to figure out a way to make it happen. Aaron, the Talmud tells us that Aaron was the first marriage therapist. This is how he would heal broken relationships. He'd go over to the wife and he'd say, I heard your husband speaking. He adores you. And then he'd go over to the husband and say, your wife, she was talking to her friends. She admires you. And as such, the husband and wife would come home and he would engender and they would create good feelings between each other. He brought them together. Peace is on Judaism on a higher pecking order than is the absolute requirement to be loyal to the letter of the law of truth. Now, are you required to lie or not? That's an interesting story. Are you allowed to actually lie? Probably not. You have to deviate from the truth. We have in the Torah as well. And I know that we're running out of time. I was told that this class is supposed to be 20 to 30 minutes. So we got a lot more to go through. I know it's an interesting topic. And if anybody does have questions, you're more than welcome to put them in the chat. I'll try getting to them. Rabbis around the world have gotten used to talking to themselves for the last few weeks because we sit in front of a screen and we project ourselves and talk to ourselves. So if you'd like to have this a two-way conversation, feel well to weigh in the chat as well. Jacob, remember the story. Isaac is blind. He's getting on in years. He feels it's now time for him to give a blessing to his child. He wants to give it to the older child, Esau. His wife prophetically realizes that God wants it to go to Jacob, to go to Yaakov. The older son is Esau. Isaac wants it to go to Esau. And all of a sudden, Yaakov walks in. He can't see. He's not able to see. Yaakov is there. And Yitzchak, Isaac, is suspicious. You know what? For various reasons, he says, I don't know if this is my older son. He asks him, are you my firstborn son? And Yaakov says, I am. Esav is your firstborn son. He sort of, I am Esav, your firstborn son. I am Esau, your firstborn son. But he doesn't actually say it as a lie. He says, I am. Esau is your firstborn son. In other words, in order to be able to create and to be able to have it such that these blessings should come to who God designated them to come to, Yaakov, Jacob deviates slightly. As a matter of fact, the Talmud tells us that, this is a Talmud and this is in the Tractate of Eruvin, page 53b, Nun Gimel Amud Beis. The Gemara says, the Talmud tells us that there were 3 times that the rabbis used to lie, or I shouldn't say the word lie, sorry. They would deviate from the truth. They would deviate from the truth, first of all, when it came to Masechta, which means someone comes to the rabbi and says, I hear that you know the entire Talmud by heart. You're a brilliant scholar, you're a brilliant sage. Well, a rabbi is allowed to say, in other words, humility. Humility would supersede the absolute imperative to be truthful to the nth degree. So humility, again, on this pecking order, on this hierarchy of Jewish values. Another case would be in regards, says, to matters of the bed. In other words, matters of intimacy between a husband and wife. Someone asks, hey, where were you guys last night? Where were you? So for the purpose of modesty, one need not reveal exactly that which takes place in the privacy of one's home. One can be more vague. Said, we had a dinner together, we had a wonderful evening together, etc., but one is allowed to deviate for the sake of modesty. So again, we have humility and we have modesty. Both of those would trump complete, absolute honesty. And the last one is an interesting case. In the case of hospitality, the Talmud actually tells us, let's say you go to someone's house and it's a really amazing experience, and then you come back and says, no, how was it at their house? Well, if you say that, they serve an incredible meal and they have comfortable beds and they're the most gracious hosts, all of a sudden they're going to be bombarded with people if you want to help them and not be bombarded with phone calls. What is allowed to say was okay. You don't need to praise the other individual to the nth degree. I'm rushing through the last few sources because I would like to get back to where we started from today. And I'll conclude with one more source, and we'll try answering our 5 case studies that we began today's class with. The Talmud, it's in the Tractate of Yevamot, 63a, Samach Gimel Amud Aleph. The Gemara says as follows. Rav was one of the all-time greats in Jewish history. He was one of the first of the Talmudic scholars. And he had a wife who was, shall we say, less than gracious to him. When he would ask her, it would be wonderful if we had lentils for dinner, she would prepare something which the Talmud called chimsi, which is another type of legume, possibly peas. When he would ask for this chimsi, she would prepare lentils. So whatever he wanted, whatever he asked for, she would give him the opposite. Perhaps not the most gracious wife. Now he had a son, an incredible son, Chia. Incredible mind and incredible personality in the Talmud. And Chia, who compiled all the brises together, really a larger-than-life figure. And Chia was his son. He was also his student. And when Chia got older, Chia would be the go-between. He would give the messages between his father and his mother. And wanting to help out his father, he would switch it around. So his father would ask for lentils. He would tell his mother that his father asked for the peas in order that she do the opposite, and she gives him lentils. Smart guy, smart cookie, right? Well, after this happening for a while, Rav turns to his son Chia and says, your mother has really improved her ways, shall we say. She's really she's really come out of herself. So Chia was forced to divulge the secret and say, actually, it was me. I've been sort of doing this a little bit. So Rav does two things, which, by the way, you can learn a lot of parenting advice from this as well, but that's for another class, another time. First, he compliments his son. He says, you know what, I should have thought of that myself. And very smart, thank you very much. However, he quotes a verse from Yirmiyahu, from Jeremiah, where Jeremiah says, Hineni ala navim ne'um Hashem halochim l'shonam. I'm against those prophets. I'm against those prophets who train their lips and their tongues to say deceitful and things that are not truthful. In other words, what you're doing is fine and what you're doing is helping me. But don't get yourself in the habit of not telling the truth. I understand that you're doing it for the right reason. I understand you're doing it to be a good son. I understand you're doing it for a noble reason. But don't train yourself to do that. A Jew needs to ingrain within oneself, within himself, the midah of emet, the character trait of telling the truth. As a matter of fact, the previous Rebbe writes about a man by the name of Rifal der Emeser. Rifal, the truthful one. Literally, he never deviated from the truth, and it's an interesting story, which again we can leave for another time. But literally, he would walk into the house. They would ask him, is it raining? He says, when I was outside, which was 2.3 seconds ago, it was raining. I don't know if it is raining now. So we conclude our class the way we began our class. We conclude our class with our case studies. Case number one, someone walks into Starbucks, wants to change his name to make it easier. An innocuous life, not harming anybody, doesn't have any financial repercussions, it's not in a court case. But as we just read in the Talmud, don't get yourself in the habit of not telling the truth. Even if it's a pain in the neck. Your name is Tzvika, not Bob. Case number two, the woman prefers, for modesty purposes, not to divulge the fact that she's expecting and pregnant. Well, modesty on the pecking order, on the hierarchy of Jewish values, would supersede absolute honesty. So that doesn't mean you lie and say no. You can say, well, thank God the children we have are a big blessing. When God gives us another one, we'll take that blessing too one day. Or it would be a great blessing. Or thank God we got our hands full right now. However you want to say it in a way which gives them the message no, but you sort of are mishaneh et ha'emet. One can deviate from the truth. Number three, the eulogy. Eulogy, we didn't get to that in Jewish law, but it does talk about the fact that one has to be careful at a eulogy, not to exaggerate. As a matter of fact, in Chabad circles, we actually avoid and sort of stay away from eulogies altogether, because saying something about someone who has passed away can have profound repercussions, it can have profound influence, and it can affect the actual soul of the one who passed away. So one should try as much as possible to stick to the script. However, in Jewish law, it does say that one is allowed to talk b'shvach and to praise the person in a way that is perhaps a little bit exaggerated from the actual fact. Number four, you had the snack in the office, if you remember. You're allowed to tell your wife you're hungry. Absolutely. Please tell your wife you're hungry. Or at least you say, ready for the greatest meal in the world, came home all prepared for this. And the last case was the false advertising. You're selling your car and you know it has some leaky hoses. You patch them up a little bit. You don't tell about that. Because there is a business transaction involved, because there's financial loss, financial gain, it's a matter of business, it's a matter of cheating, it's a matter of stealing. One would have to actually really be very, very careful. Even blowing up that Cheerio on the cereal box to enhance its look with a little small words underneath, size does not reflect the actual what's in the box. That also might be questionable in Jewish law. I end as we started. Each case is different, and one needs to consult a competent local Orthodox rabbi who is practicing and is competent in these laws. God bless each and every one of you. In the merit of truth, may each of us merit to go from strength to strength. Truth, God willing, emet, the seal of God, the aleph, the mem, and the taf, first letter of the alphabet, the middle letter of the alphabet, last letter of the alphabet. By combining all that together, middle, beginning, and end, we will actually have the very last blessing that God promised in the very beginning of the Torah, Rucho Shel Mashiach, the spirit of Mashiach. God bless you. Have a wonderful Shabbat and Chag Sameach. May you all be merit to internalize and receive the Torah with tremendous joy, Kabbalat HaTorah, Simcha, Ubepnimiyut. Thank you very much.